Hello, everyone. My name is Monty Nima, and I'm a junior at Novi High School here in the state of Michigan. Welcome to our 2020 Tech Series, and thank you all so much for joining us today.
Hi, my name is Aaliyah Hirji, and I'm also a junior at Novi High School. We're so excited to be the moderators of this panel today.
Today we have our inspiring speaker, Isabella, and she'll be talking about college essays, the application process, and just some general advice she has. So Isabella, would you like to tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Isabella Wloch, and I just graduated as part of the class of 2020 from the International Academy West in White Lake. And I'm planning on attending the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor in the fall as part of the M-Sci Academy and the College of Literature, Science, and the Arts. I'm hoping to pursue some research and on a pre-med track.
That's so cool. So our first question for you is, what has helped you get to where you are, and what advice would you have for others who want to set off in a similar direction?
So most of you probably don't know, but I started the GEMS Club at my local elementary school. It stands for Girls Excelling in Math and Science. And I wouldn't have been able to start this program that's meant to get girls into STEM fields and encourage them without proper mentors from a very young age. In fact, my fourth grade teacher, Mrs. Davis, was actually the original founder of the GEMS program. But after a few years, it died out, and so I reinstated it at Hillside. And she was really important to me because she really pushed me out of my comfort zone and helped me take opportunities that I probably wouldn't have been comfortable with. She was actually the person who encouraged my parents and I to think about me skipping a grade, which obviously was really important to my educational path, very influential. And along the lines of her saying of all the things she pushed me to do and pushing me out of my comfort zone, that kind of leads me to my first bit of advice for anybody pursuing a STEM career or education, is that you need to be able to distinguish between criticism and helpful advice. Because I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and this has kind of held me back in some ways in the past. So for me, a very important step was being able to distinguish between people genuinely criticizing you and being not very nice, but also mentors giving you helpful advice. This not only helps you to improve on your skills, like maybe in the laboratory, but it also shows potential mentors that you have the ability to collaborate and improve on yourself. And that makes you a better candidate for any internships or jobs and those kind of things. Also, I recommend, if you're still a student in high school, talking with your teachers after class and sharing about topics that you find interested related to their subject, because for the obvious reason, this gives them more to write about you in their rec letters, because rec letters are better for colleges when they're specific and they're tailored to the student, and they're not just a general, oh, she participated in class or he raised his hand a lot. Speaking of relationships with mentors, those are very, very important. But in my experience, I've determined that it's also really important to have excellent relationships with your peers, because yes, your mentors and your teachers are the people who are going to be connecting you with internships. However, your peers are the ones that you're going to be able to relate with on a much more close level than you probably ever would with your teachers. And in my experience, my peers are the ones who have introduced me to new things. Going to a very competitive high school, such as the International Academy, there were a lot of people who were just as smart and intelligent, if not more than me. And being a perfectionist, kind of going back to the idea of keeping an open mind, it was a little bit hard for me at first to deal with the idea of having competition. But once I stopped thinking of it as competition, and once I kind of got rid of any jealousy that I had towards people who maybe were naturally more talented in mathematics or chemistry than I, it was a bit of a eureka moment for me, because then I was able to keep an open mind when talking to them, and I saw so many different ways of learning. One example of this is, there's actually a peer who introduced me to programming. Up until honestly like the middle of my senior year, like this is very recent, I kind of had the attitude that, oh, programming, it's just not for me. Like I'm more lab-based, I'm in the field, and programming will never be useful to me and I just won't be good at it. And that attitude held me back because, as I know now, programming is extremely helpful in any field. And so I'm just starting to learn more about it and starting off with some basic programming languages. But my point is that it was a peer that introduced me to that and encouraged me to join their programming club. It wasn't a teacher, it was my fellow students. And one kind of last piece of advice on this is don't focus so much on the grades you receive in a class, especially STEM classes, since they can be really hard, organic chemistry, for example. More focus on the learning itself. So my first chemistry exam in the International Baccalaureate program was a bit of a disappointment for me. I barely passed the exam, and I was really disappointed in myself. But I had to change my mindset completely and experiment with new study techniques after that, because otherwise I would have kept a C in the class, and I was not okay with that because I have pretty high expectations for myself. So I kind of started seeing wrong, points marked off on exams less as points lost and more as opportunities for learning that subject. I had the attitude of, okay, this is the topic I need to talk about with Mr. Stewart after class. And so being willing to adjust your study and work habits is an essential part of succeeding in STEM. And don't let yourself get disappointed or down on yourself for one bad test grade.
I think that's all really great advice, all the way from working with your mentors and having that strong mentor support, as well as just having good relationships with your peers. And I think it's really unique how you started talking a little bit also about taking your challenges as more opportunities to grow, which I think is a really helpful skill in life in general. So yeah, I think that's just really some great insight into that. And another question that we had was, since you are a recent senior, so you just graduated, what advice do you have in terms of the college application process?
Great question. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The college application process was the most stressful time in my life, but something I had to learn to do that really helped me, and I got help from my counselors and my teachers with this, is managing stress and making it productive, turning all those worries into productivity, and something that will actually help you write your essays. So the biggest thing I learned throughout this whole process is you cannot successfully write an essay about something that you are not passionate about or have not experienced. Do not let your parents, your teachers give you something to write about. Do not let them tell you that you should write about neuroscience when what you're really passionate about maybe is analyzing feminist undertones in Shakespeare or something like that. It's very important that you write about something that you're passionate about, because college admissions officers will be able to tell. It's evident. Even your peers, if you have them peer edit your essays, they can tell. Also, something that often I feel contributes to stress with students applying to colleges is maybe parental expectations, or really any mentors' expectations for their essays or applications. And something that helped me and helped some of my friends is the importance of setting boundaries with mentors or family members to keep your essays authentic. Something I would recommend trying to say if you feel that your essays are starting to become more your mentor's writing and your mentor's words is to say, I really appreciate your help, but I only want you to review this essay once, and I'd like it if you stuck to providing feedback only on grammar or clarity. I want to keep the fundamental ideas unique and personal. If they're a good mentor, they'll understand this and they'll understand the boundaries, and then you still get the help from them, the useful help of editing, but you keep your essay as your own. And it takes the pressure of pleasing another person away a little bit, because let's be honest, this is already a very taxing and stressful undertaking. I also recommend talking to students at the college you're applying to. And if you don't have any personal contacts or contacts through a friend, in my research, I found a lot of great online forums to look at. They answer questions like, what is the typical student at your school like? But I would exercise caution using these sites because obviously you don't want to get into the habit of writing your essays based on the answers from these colleges. If you were to look at a site and say, oh, what is this typical student at this college like? And then you write your essay from the perspective of that, that's not authentic, that's not honest. People are going to see right through it. And one of the last things I'm going to talk about, and very, very important, is your stats. So your stats are like your ACT scores, your GPA, those kind of very numerical figures that help admissions officers determine whether you're a good candidate. For me, it was important to learn not to compare stats with my peers because that stressed me out. Now, maybe that doesn't stress you out, but I feel like that's a common theme. For most people, it does. And the lie I always told myself during the process was, oh, comparing my scores just gives me context for my application or lets me know where I stand. And that's not productive at all. It'll make you feel bad about yourself, or it'll give you false confidence. So I recommend just trying to keep that on the down low. Rather talk about things you're passionate about or projects that you want to write about with your peers, because they might give you ideas on how to make your essays based on those even better. But like I said, don't ignore your stats completely. And this leads me into another very important subject, which is having safety schools. Safety schools are super important. I know my counselor required us all to have a safety school, and that was a great move. And it's important to distinguish the fact that safety schools do not mean that you are any less impressive, and they don't mean that you're going to attend that school. If anything, it makes you more impressive to have a safety school because it shows that you have common sense, and also just recognizing the uber competitive college admissions process. Admissions rates are getting lower every year. It's extremely hard to get into these top colleges that many students are. And so it's important to have a safety school.
Yeah, I think that's all really great advice on how to make the college application process like a lot less stressful for yourself. Our next question for you is, do you have any advice for students on how to get started on college essays? I know it seems like such a big thing and it seems kind of scary to get started. So do you have any tips for how to do that?
Yep. For me, it was a little bit hard to get started on writing my essays because, like so many other students, I didn't know what to write about. And of course, I procrastinate like many others. And that's one small side note on procrastination. If you haven't already solved it, it's hard to solve. So just do your best with what you have and try not to let it stress you out. So to get started on college essays, it's most important to know yourself. So what I did was I opened a Google document and I started writing a mind map, which can take any form. I started with clubs that I had done, community service, and then just things I enjoyed or things I found interesting. I linked articles that I had read that had genuinely made me excited about learning about the subject more. I just wrote little snippets about trips to museums where I learned about bioluminescence and how I found that so interesting. And this helps you because you'll discover your niche or what makes you unique, and everyone has one. So just after brainstorming this, you should be able to answer the question, what makes you unique? Because your entire application should not be just a list of your greatest accomplishments. That would be so boring to read. It should be a mix of your accomplishments, but also your personality. Somebody should be able to read your essays, pick them up, and know exactly who wrote it, if they know you well. A big part of admissions is personality and how you match with the type of learner the college is looking for. It's not just about stats. I've known people who have had lower stats but gotten into a school because of their personality or the way they learned and just their essays. Now, another important thing is have fun with your essays. even though I was rejected from Stanford, I still remember being super proud of my answers to those essays because I was authentic in them. And don't beat yourself up. Sometimes great stats and essays just aren't enough. But I don't want to end this question on a low note because my authenticity did eventually pay off. In my application to the University of Michigan, I was honest, vulnerable, and I tried to be humorous. Sometimes I'm not that great at it, but I tried and I got in. And most importantly, I showcased my true love for the school and my desire to go there. And above all, that is the most important thing that you want to talk about in your essays, that you want to convey in your words. I'm a firm believer that you'll get in where you belong, even if it doesn't feel that way. Even if you get rejected from your dream school, it was probably for a good reason, and I'm sure you'll flourish where you end up. And the next bit is cheesy but true. Where you go matters so much less than what you do there, despite brand name culture in college applications. Because if you are a hard worker and you take advantage of your resources, you can get so many more opportunities. And what I mean by taking advantage of resources is going to club meetings and exploring all these different avenues of learning, because that's how you make connections with people. That's how you find mentors. Those are the people that are going to say, hey, I have like an interview for you if you'd want to go to, or I have a research project that I've been looking for help on. That's how you get those people. That's how you make those connections. You can't make connections if you're not outgoing and looking for opportunities.
Oh, I thought that was like all really like helpful advice in terms of like how to get started, and just like in general sort of takes away a little bit, just a little bit of stress of just like the overwhelming feeling that I think a lot of people get when they think about writing their essay. So do you have any advice in terms of like, so there's like the Common App essay, which is like your own essay, but then there's also like supplemental essays, which is like, why do you want to go to this college? So I know in your question you touched upon like how to convey sort of your interest in that school. So what sort of advice do you have in terms of that, or like how to write that type of essay?
If it's possible, I recommend touring the school or going online and doing online tours, because those can help you. You can pick up snippets of information about the school or facts that you can kind of weave into your application that you found interesting about the school, and that'll let the school know that you are interested in them. And that's an important way of conveying your interest. Obviously, it's not always possible to take these tours, so just do your research. Yes, your application is meant to be personal and personal expression, but you also want to do your research on the school, what programs they have that interest you, and this goes back to the mind map I was talking about in Google Docs or any document. You find your niche, and then you can find programs online that the school has that fit your niche, and that will help you kind of convey in your essays that you belong at the school or that you really love the school.
I think that's great advice. I know it's like hard to, especially for like juniors right now, I feel like it's a little hard and kind of sad that like we aren't really able to go and tour a lot of colleges right now. So I think that's helpful to know that we can still do our research and still do great in those essays if we like try and do the research. So yeah, thank you. I have a question on rec letters. Do you have any advice for students on how to ask teachers for rec letters and when to start?
You should start your asking for rec letters as early as possible. I recommend, I know some people asked at the end of their junior year, but I asked probably the very beginning of my senior year or a couple days before school started. I sent an email. But also there are some policies that your school might have about when to ask for rec letters. I know I went to a small school, so they had a policy of like a form you had to fill out and send to the teacher. And some teachers only take a certain number of students to write their rec letters. So asking early is always really important. Don't just go up and ask them. I recommend trying to, at least have a little bit of small talk first. That's just being polite. But also, if they are maybe a leader of a club at your school or an administrator, you should find a way to connect with them through that club. And you want to make sure these people they know you on a personal level as well as just in the classroom. And that's very important. Also, once they've written your letter of rec, you need to send them a thank you note. Some people send gifts as well, but a thank you note is essential. If you can't afford a gift or you don't want to, that's okay, but you need to write a thank you.
I thought that was really great advice in terms of like how to ask, and then of course like thanking your teachers for taking the time out of their busy schedules to write that. So thank you for mentioning that. I also was just wondering, do you have any sort of general advice that you want to give to students as we're like nearing the end of our interview with you? Do you have any sort of like last comment or like general advice that you'd like to give to students?
Being confident in yourself is very important, and that's kind of something I want to leave you all with, because it's something I've struggled with in the past and so many others. And being confident in your skills and your ability to succeed does not make you cocky or anything of the sort. There's a fine line, but if you're a good person, then you know where that line is. And just be confident in your ability. Raise your hand in class. People say that there's no such thing as a stupid question, and I agree. And what's the worst that's going to happen? People will forget immediately if you say something that is maybe not correct. I've had countless times when I've said so confidently an answer in biology or chemistry that was just completely wrong. You just laugh it off, and then the next time you raise your hand and you answer the question correctly. So self-confidence is very, very important.
Thank you so much for all the advice you've given us today. I think it's just really nice to hear someone that's been through the whole like crazy college admissions process, and I'm really excited to see the things that you're going to do. And yeah, thank you just so much for being a part of our panel and for spending time to do this. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.